Okay, we left off last time. We finished Exodus. Exodus is the second book of the Pentateuch. Now, Pentateuch means 5 books, and so we're 2/5 of the way through that. You know, Penta means 5, like Pentagon, and Pentatonics, one of my favorite like a cappella singing groups. 5 of those 5 tonics, I guess, 5 singers. Well, Pentateuch is 5 books. So by the end of Exodus, God's called a people for his own possession, the line of Abraham, according to his son, through his son Isaac. They lived in Egypt, rescued by Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. Okay, so Joseph was forgotten by the Egyptian leaders, and the Israelites were oppressed and made into slaves. And so as we work our way through Exodus, we find out, because there's pictures here for what happens in the New Testament, and we have to have a good basis in the Old here. So Moses is born, courageously saved by floating him in a basket down the river. They were supposed to throw the babies in the river. Well, they kind of threw him in the river, but they put him in a basket first. And so he was rescued, raised by Pharaoh's family, and he finally identifies with Israel and flees to Midian, where God calls him to return to Egypt and rescue his people. He's in Midian for 40 years, and Midian is the place where I believe is where he's going to return here with the people of God. He spent all that time in that wilderness, and I think that's where he's going to lead Israel back to as they leave Egypt. So, you know, Moses pronounces the judgments, and all these judgments happen, the last one being the death of the firstborn. And it's interesting, you've got to understand that in order to understand the language of the New Testament. In Hebrews 12, I think 23, might be off there, but it says, the church of the firstborn. You know, the church of the firstborn. Well, what is that talking about? Well, the church of the firstborn in the New Testament is a church. What would that represent? The church of the redeemed. The firstborn were the ones redeemed by the blood of the Lamb at the time of the Exodus. So when you're called the church of the firstborn, you're the church of the redeemed. Also, the firstborn are what? They are the heirs, the inheritors of all that's the Father has. Well, you know, we're seen in the New Testament, Jesus is called the firstborn of all creation. It's not that he was born, it's that he's the heir of all creation, and we become joint heirs with him. So it's good to understand the language of the Old Testament and the things that happen, because they're all pictures of what we're going to run into in the New Testament. So Moses pronounces the judgments, leads Israel out of Egypt to Mount Sinai, where they receive the law. And this is where they become a nation. They finally have a law as a nation. They have the golden calf rebellion in the camp. When the call's made, who's going to stand for the Lord? You know, originally the Lord wanted all of Israel to be a royal priesthood, a holy nation unto him. He wanted them all to be priests. Well, here there's a call. Who's going to stand on the Lord's side? And it says the Levites come to that side. And so the Levites join, and they stand for the Lord, and they go through the camp and slaughter the rebellious ones. But, well, anyway, we leave Exodus with God leading Israel through the wilderness. And it's with a miraculous cloud, you know, during the day, and fire by night. You know, in the daytime they needed a cloud, they needed some shade, and then nighttime they needed the fire, and it's easier to see, of course, at night. So then we turn to Leviticus, and so here we've got the Levites are the ones that chose to be on the Lord's side. They're set aside now. We're narrowing it down from Israel as a royal priesthood, all of them, to the Levites are the priesthood. And Leviticus spells out for us then the duties of the Levites, the duties of the priestly tribe. And there's sacrifices, holy items, and how to do proper ministry before the Lord. And there's the laws in here they're civil, they're sanitary, they're ceremonial, they're moral, they're religious, all kinds of laws to cover every aspect of life and to give you a good governmental oversight. You know, and it's interesting that the founders of the United States of America used the Old Testament laws, the Old Testament ideas that God gave, and melded them together with some other concepts that they found. But so similar was our founding to this founding that, you know, it's really significant to us in America. So the first 6 chapters of Leviticus describe the types of offerings There's sin offering, burnt offering, guilt offering, peace offering. There's different offerings that are made there. And the idea is these offerings are made to atone for sin. Now, atonement comes from the word that means to cover. And atonement, one way to look at it is, some people have broken it up. It's maybe a little hokey, but at-one-ment. At-one-ment. Atonement. If you break it up, you can say at-one-ment, which means that God, through covering our sin, brings us together and we become one with Him. So atonement's made so that the people of God have access to God and they have access to His intended blessings. And so that's what we find in the first several chapters here in Leviticus, is just the different offerings, the different sacrifices, and it's worthwhile to read those. It's good to come to the understanding. But I'm going to skim through a lot of Leviticus. I want to come to chapter 9, though, and it's talking here, it talks about the sacrifices that are needed to allow the glory of the Lord to appear to His people. So I'm going to look at, starting with verse 1. Now it came about on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and the sons of the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, "Take for yourselves a calf, a bull, for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, both without defect, and offer them before the Lord." It's important, this without defect, without spot or wrinkle, without any kind of marring. They got to be a perfect lamb. They got a perfect bull, a perfect one. And that's important when we're talking about sacrifice, because that's what qualified Jesus as the only sacrifice for humankind, is that He was one who was without sin. He dwelt with us. He was a man like what we are. He's a human, but He had no sin. He was this perfect lamb without defect. And then it says, "Then to the sons of Israel you shall speak, saying, Take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both 1 year old without defect, for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for peace offerings, to sacrifice before the Lord, and the grain offering mixed with oil, for today the Lord shall appear to you." So in the first few chapters of Leviticus, we have the description of all these offerings. Then there comes this time, it says, okay, bring all of these different ones at this one time. And so verse 5, "So they took what Moses had commanded to the front of the tent of the meeting, and the whole congregation came near and stood before the Lord. And Moses said, This is the thing which the Lord has commanded you to do, that the glory of the Lord may appear to you." So there's really a connection here of what happens when all of these things are in order, when all of the sacrifices are satisfied, when God's satisfied with all the sacrifices. It says, then the glory of the Lord appears. And it's like that, in type. This is the type of what would happen in the New Testament for the glory of the Lord to appear to us when things are truly in order. And of course, it changes a little bit in the New Testament. It's still a matter of faith, but it's faith in Jesus, and there's a place of repentance, which is the same as changing your mind and doing what God says, but aligning yourself with His process. And there is a incredible picture of the sacrifice and the cost there is to this atonement. There's a great cost to the atonement. It costs a lot of regarding the wealth of the people giving it, because they're giving up their own cattle, their own sheep, their own goats. And so there is sacrifice involved, and it is costly for the sacrifice. So we see what happened when they did this. Verse 24, "Then fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the portions of fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces." So here we see what happens when they bring everything out. The fire actually comes and consumes these offerings right before their eyes. And so when they've made themselves right with God and everything that He's prescribed, and they're following His ways, here's what happens. And it's not even that they've always done right, because why were they doing these things? It was to cover their guilt, to cover their sin, to cover, to bring them at peace with God. And so they were offering these sacrifices, but when they did it according to His word and according to His ways, it says the glory of the Lord appears to them in a fire that comes down and burns the offering right in front of their eyes. And what's their response? Well, here, they saw it, they shouted, and they fell on their faces. And, I think when we really see the glory of the Lord, when He really appears, what's scary about it is like when Jesus raised Lazarus from the tomb. I don't think everyone stood there and clapped and, "Oh, praise God. I think when he came out of that tomb like that, I bet you there's quite a few people took off running and screaming. And they were getting out of there as fast as they could, because it's not natural. It's supernatural. And here's what's happening at this place. When all the offerings were made and God was at peace with what the people were doing, there was a supernatural manifestation. It was beyond what was, anything normal that could possibly happen, and they saw it right in front of their eyes. And so we're going to move on from there and cover, basically in this, we'll skip through and cover something out of chapters 23, 16, 23, and 25.